It really does look like 2013 is going to be the year of the 5-inch 1080p screen device. However, what if you need just a little bit more out of your smartphone? Well, there really only were just a couple devices out there that fulfilled the need for a device that was bigger than a regular phone, but smaller than a tablet. And luckily, LG has decided to throw their own name in the category with their newest release. Hey, it's Joshua Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And what you're looking at here is certainly the biggest phone that I have ever used. This is the LG Optimus G Pro. This is by far the largest smartphone that LG has ever put out, and that does come with a number of expected aspects. The Optimus G Pro comes with a 5.5-inch screen that makes the entire form factor almost 6 inches tall, and it is just about as thick as the Samsung Galaxy Note 2 at 9.4mm. The buttons on the LG are pretty typical, with the power button on the right opposite the volume rockers. You get the home button on the face of the phone flanked by back and menu buttons. It even has an LED rim around the home button for notifications. A 2.1 megapixel front-facing camera is up top. The main addition here is the inclusion of a Q button at the very top left of the device for programming a specific shortcut. Coming around the back, you have the 13 megapixel camera surrounded by a flash diode, a speaker, and LG's typical but beautiful crystal reflection pattern. The only other feature of the back cover that is probably most important is the fact that it can be removed. We'll get to the bits underneath, but calm your nerves. The Optimus G Pro is capable of expandable memory and the battery is replaceable. Oh, and yes, there is an antenna also, a long one, so yeah, there's that. If you still find it difficult to handle a phone larger than 4.7 inches on the screen, then making the leap to 5.5 inches is going to be a bit of a stretch. Quite literally, too. You will be stretching your hand to get around the body of the Optimus G Pro. The button layout isn't completely practical as the power and volume buttons land above where the fingers would land on the phone, not to mention the faraway Q button. While the flat sides do lend to some ease in the grip, the plastic feel reminiscent of Samsung phones makes this a very slippery phone. This is definitely a phone made for two-hand operations, and if you try too hard with just one hand, the Optimus G Pro can just slip right out. I've only gotten used to 5-inch devices recently, and I have never owned a Galaxy Note, so this is definitely a foreign handle for me. As much as a big screen might be awesome, I'm not entirely convinced that this is the kind of device for me. But if you are already used to note-sized proportions, then you should feel right at home with the feel and look of the Optimus G Pro. And it is that screen that helps bring the main appeal for LG's biggest device. This true HD IPS screen is 5.5 inches and sports a 1080p resolution. The higher resolution does benefit from the larger screen size, making viewing videos and gaming all really fun. Pixel density comes in at 401 ppi, which is a bit of a mid-range value considering the lower performing screens and then the more dense 441 ppi screens from the likes of the Droid DNA and the Oppo Find 5. The difference is pretty negligible, however, so the sharpness is still very good. Despite not really being a fan of such an immense phone, I do admit that the bigger screen is quite fun. Videos look great, especially when formatted for the full HD resolution. Go and get an HD game and you'll see it perform greatly as well. The display also has numerous viewing angles that showcase its prowess. At pretty much any angle, the display still looks good and elements on the screen remain legible. Underneath that enormous screen is one of the more advanced processing packages we should start to see these days. In an upgrade from the S4 Pro, the Optimus G Pro is packing the Snapdragon 600 CPU that clocks in at a great 1.7 GHz. Now we all know and love the Adreno 320 graphics processor that is included, and then finally there are 2 GB of RAM. Benchmark tests show that the Optimus G Pro sits among the best, and TuTu benchmark brings in a score of just under 19,000, which might have been a result of the larger screen and its pretty immense demand for power. Epic Citadel then gave the graphics processing package its stamp of approval with a wonderful rating of 57.2 average frames per second. Thus, this is LG's biggest effort in performance, and it definitely shows in the user interface and in the experience. So the numbers don't lie. This is definitely a beast in more ways than one. Otherwise, you do get the usual bevy of bells and whistles. GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. You don't have to worry about storage in the Optimus G Pro as it already comes with 32 GB of onboard memory. But then that brings us to the real story here, the removable back cover. 32 GB of memory is already awesome, but consider that there is an SD card slot available. Now you have all the storage you could want. It is one feature many people really want, and the Optimus G Pro does well to include it. And then there's the battery. There have been mixed results with batteries in phones with larger screens as of late, but LG has made sure power will never be an issue. So the first step, put in a massive 3140 mAh battery. Looping a video yielded about 7 hours of straight battery life, but in using the phone for an entire day, it didn't run out of juice before being plugged in for the night. And the second step, give the customer a spare battery, and include a charging dock that can charge that spare battery for usage whenever you need it. Finally, the third step, great power-saving options. You can have a number of features turned off automatically when the battery level reaches a programmed low. LG has done well to include all of this so you never have to fear a power loss again. Which brings us around to software. The Optimus UI is largely unchanged from the one found in the Optimus G. It comes with a lot of different additions to the installed Jelly Bean 4.1.2. Most notable of all of these are the Q apps. A couple of them include Q Slide, which is a multitasking feature that allows for a number of small apps to overlay whatever you are already working on. This includes videos, memos, or even calendars. Also, there is Q Memo, which is a neat feature that takes a quick, editable screenshot of what you are looking at. Write all over it or highlight key areas. Now, these are only a couple of the multitude of additions LG has put into their user interface. And speaking of which, the Optimus UI happens to be one of my favorite third-party UIs. It is one of the most customizable, which allows changes to the lock screen in its unlock design or programmed icons, and even has the inclusion of swipe effects and color schemes for the home screens. Its style is simplistic and elegant, but there are so many elements involved that the Optimus UI feels like the whole package. As I mentioned before, this is a phone made for two hands. There are tools, however, that help one-handed operations. For example, the keyboards or dial pads can be shrunken down and moved to either side of the screen for one hand to perform those tasks. It's nice, especially with the inclusion of swipe typing, but once you have to reach over to the other side of the screen, the feature loses its magic. LG tries quite hard to make this phone accessible for everyone, but it's obvious that only a specific subset of people will really jump at the chance to call this behemoth a daily driver. And finally, we have the camera. With 13 megapixels, the 2.4 aperture optics on the Optimus G Pro brings some good specs to its images. Megapixels never tell the whole story, but luckily the camera in the G Pro is a great performer. Much like the Optimus G, from which this camera might actually come from, resulting pictures have wonderful color reproduction. So much so, in fact, that sometimes you might see that there's a little bit too much color in certain elements and they wash out some of the details. Nonetheless, outdoor shots have a great vibrancy to them, and indoor shots are surprisingly good because the optics flood in enough light for a good picture. Features in the camera include an intelligent auto that changes the settings according to the perceived scene and a VR panorama mode that is much like the photosphere found in Jelly Bean 4.2. Videos are given the full HD treatment regardless of which camera you are using, rear or front. Dual recording, as you saw in the intro, is a neat feature that I would certainly use for fun dual shot or dual person videos. Ultimately, the camera is a wonderful performer that reminds me how much I loved the Optimus G's camera. I would venture to say that it is even more of an improvement, and despite the size of the phone, it is one damn good photo companion to have. And so, there you have it. The Optimus G Pro brings you all the best LG can offer in a large body made to take full advantage of those features. Personally, I'm not completely convinced of the 5.5-inch factor, especially with the lack of a peripheral like the S Pen found on Galaxy Note devices. But there is a lot of fun to be had on this large device. Yet if you are already having trouble with 5-inch screen devices, then this is definitely not going to make anything any easier. Nonetheless, the Optimus G Pro is the full package with its awesome screen, wonderful performance, expandable memory, and a replaceable battery, all features that LG has properly taken advantage of. It is currently one of the best devices, especially for those who need a little bit more out of their smartphones. If you happen to be one of these people, then the Optimus G Pro by LG just might be your perfect device. For all of the news on the LG Optimus G Pro and all of the features we'll have upcoming, stay tuned to AndroidAuthority.com and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we are your source for all things Android.